Between Hollywood and the streaming platforms. Black Widow star Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney for streaming the film online at the same time it opened it in theaters. In court filings, Johansson claims Disney tried to draw audiences away from theaters to its own streaming platform. She says Disney promised the film would have an exclusive theatrical release for at least 90 days. Disney maintains it fully complied with Johansson's contract. So let's bring in Bloomberg Opinion's Tara LaChapelle and Quick Takes Alex Webb. Tara is here with me in studio. So let's just start with you, Tara. I love your new column. It's titled, Disney Should Know Not to Battle a Superhero. I want to ask you, did you see this coming?
I think so, because, last winter when Warner Media decided they were going to put all of the Warner Brothers films on HBO Max, starting with Wonder Woman 1984, Gal Gadot, Patty Jenkins, the director in that film, they had some reportedly tense negotiations with Warner Brothers about what that would mean for them, because a lot of times the stars in these films are promised a certain amount of pay based on how well the movies do in movie theaters. So when the studios pull a bait and switch like this and decide, well, we're going to put it on opening weekend, available online for people, well, you've just undermined those box office sales. And so that can be pretty meaningful for these actors. So a lot of them had been kind of behind the scenes renegotiating with these studios, especially Warner. And it's really interesting that this is the first case where we saw actually a lawsuit come out of it. You have to imagine these studios want to avoid that. It doesn't look very good. So, it's interesting to see Scarlett Johansson come out and sue Disney as opposed to Disney trying to get ahead of this and working out a deal before it got to that point.
Right, and especially because she's such a big star. How much money do we know could she have potentially benefited if they would have gone through with the theatrical release first and then streaming?
So we don't really know, but the lawsuit claims that she could have been shortchanged by about $50 million or more, which is a substantial amount of money. It's hard to put a figure on that precisely because we know that the box office is down. So it's not just that Disney put this film on Disney Plus. The whole reason they put it on Disney Plus is because not as many people are going to theaters. So, the box office overall, ticket sales are down about 80% from 2019. So it wasn't going to be as large of a turnout anyway, but of course this certainly didn't help her from a compensation standpoint, and these actors want to be paid fairly.
Totally. And Alex, come in here because you say a lot of this sort of comes down to data and these streaming platforms. Talk to us about that.
I mean, anyone apart from the companies that own the streaming platforms themselves, anyone else gets little to no visibility into the actual data. How many people are viewing a given show? How many people are signing up because of a given show or film? So even if you're a production company that sells a production to Netflix or HBO or whoever it might be, they will not tell you how many people on the whole have watched that show. That makes it quite hard for you to determine your value to that platform. You can look at estimates and maybe get a vague sense from third parties, but it means you have less negotiating power going forward. They know how valuable you are to their platform. That's now the case as well, clearly, for actors, that when you could see public box office numbers, you know that it's grossed 50 million in the first weekend. That means that you can demonstrate, well, I'm really valuable to you as a studio when I'm sitting down for my next negotiation for the next picture, either with you or indeed with another production company or another studio. I can draw the line and say, here is how I can deliver value to you. And that is starting to be unpicked now.
Right. And, I thought it was interesting, too, in Disney's response. I mean, they seem pretty defiant, right? I mean, they're saying this lawsuit has no merit whatsoever. Tara, I'm wondering, what sort of troubles could this spell for Disney? Are they taking a hit at all?
They probably will. I think for all these studios, it shows that streaming is very messy and complicated, and it's going to get harder before it gets easier. This is one of those overlooked costs of switching to streaming, not just all the money they spend on streaming shows, but trying to renegotiate contracts that are going to be troublesome for them. But I also think that Disney specifically, they now, if you go on Twitter, for instance, today, there are a lot of people throwing support behind Scarlett Johansson, a lot of Marvel fans. In the public arena of perception and brand perception, Scarlett Johansson is going to win that fight regardless of what happens in the lawsuit, and that's just not a position a brand like Disney, which is kind of an expert at averting scandals like this, they don't want to be in that position. So I think that they should have probably tried to get ahead of this and negotiate something, and it doesn't look good, But we don't know what's going to happen with this lawsuit, but I can't imagine she will be the last actress to complain about this.
Absolutely not. Alex, I wonder, what do you think other streamers are looking at as it pertains to this specific incident that's happening right now. I mean, Disney has another film that's coming out today, Jungle Cruise, which, Tara, maybe you can correct me. It's coming out on streaming as well, right?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, that's the trend right now. They're all going to streaming.
I wonder, Alex, what do you think other streamers are looking at?
Well, I think that, in a sense, promising someone a cut of the gross is actually a way of managing your risk. You know, you don't have to pay them as much if the film doesn't do as well. You're actually probably going to end up with them having to shoulder a bit more risk. They won't be able to give them a cut of the gross, but they can say, well, we'll pay you more money up front. Now, inevitably, when you have a streaming platform, some of that risk is hedged because you're going to attract a long tail of viewership. You want to have as much content as possible. The quality of it can be middling. So it might be that actually they end up paying actors more, or paying talent generally more up front, but not promising them a cut of revenue further down the line.
And I wonder, for both of you, do you anticipate this to just be sort of the new way that actors and entertainers are sort of negotiating their contracts, or is this sort of specific to the pandemic? Tara, maybe you can start.
I think this specifically, it has to do with the pandemic because we're renegotiating deals that were already signed. But as Alex talked about, the data is going to make it very hard in streaming for these actors to know if they're getting paid fairly because the viewership numbers are very nebulous, and there's not really a standardized provider to track streaming viewership at this point. So we just don't know the way that we do at the box office, and I bet this is going to be a sticky subject for this industry for a long time.
Alex, you want to jump in here?
I think there's also an interesting point of comparison between, Warner Media, which owns the sort of DC comics, and we talked about Gal Gadot earlier, and Marvel, where Marvel, there are, as we saw in the Avengers movies, so many different superheroes, and therefore so many different stars. They're not, beholden to any one actor or actress. In the Warner Media universe, they've only got a handful, so those guys have a little bit more power than the Marvel stars do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really fascinating. And the Marvel universe is so expansive, right? And Scarlett Johansson is such a integral part of it. Tara, as you mentioned, it's not something that Disney can sort of like tiptoe away without sort of coming out in full force, taking a stand one way or another.
Absolutely, and now they've got other stars in the Marvel franchise that they're going to have to be talking to, because what we saw with Warner was that other stars, representatives for Denzel Washington, Keanu Reeves, Margot Robbie, all came out after the Gal Gadot situation and said, well, I want my client to be paid fairly now too. So this is going to set off a chain reaction for sure.
Got it. So fascinating. Alex, you want to have the last word?
Please read Tara's piece. I think it's really worth looking at. I think Scarlett Johansson, it's good that she's making this stand. The ability, though, of actors who don't have a cut of the gross, the people who are a bit less powerful, and she's not necessarily standing up for the little guy here. She's standing up for other quite big actors and quite big stars.
Yeah, she is, and I think what's really interesting too. I mean, I think at first I was questioning sort of the timing that she came out with this lawsuit, but really it sort of goes to, I think she was touching on the fact that the second weekend sales, right, dropped so significantly compared to other Marvel films.
I mean, that's the thing. Opening weekend is so important, especially for a blockbuster film. All the big fans want to go see it right away, and so if you put it on streaming the same day, that's an issue. Not all the studios are doing that. Universal is thinking of waiting a few months after their movie is released next year before they put them on Peacock. That makes a big difference in the profits for these actors.
Fascinating. Earlier this week I was speaking to Miles Teller, who is going to be starring in the new Top Gun too, and he was talking about how he didn't really have a preference one way or another whether it comes out in a theatrical release or streaming release. But it's really interesting to think about sort of how actors and entertainers and performers are maybe renegotiating or rethinking about sort of the profits that they might obtain from their films.
They're definitely keeping a lot of lawyers busy right now, that's for sure. I mean, this is going to be a very challenging time for these studios that are already going through the complete upheaval of the streaming wars right now. So this definitely adds another prickly point to it.
Another prickly point to it. I definitely still need to see Black Widow myself. All right, Bloomberg Opinions, Tara LaChapelle, and Quick Takes, Alex Webb. Thank you guys so much for talking about this. This is a really interesting story. All right.